Writing Out Loud, a program designed to explore in-depth interviews with writers to hear that words have voices.
Hello everyone, I'm Teresa Miller and welcome to Writing Out Loud. I'm sitting here with my all-time favorite writer, Pat Conroy. Thank you for being here, Pat.
It is a pleasure, Teresa. I always love coming to Tulsa.
Well, we love having you here, and this is a very exciting time. We're going to be talking about your latest book in progress. Well, it's actually finished now, not published yet. But I wanted to start by talking about your latest published book, My Reading Life, because people love this book, Pat. They love it. And I wondered when reading first became a real passion for you.
You know, I can tell you, I adore my high school teachers. And I had just a murderer's row of high school teachers. And they're in different schools. I don't know how they showed up in my life, but they changed my life forever and completely. And one was in Washington, D.C., Joseph Monty. He's 80 years old. He's still teaching.
Still teaching.
He's still teaching, and evidently he's still, the admiration or even adoration I felt for him was felt by generations of kids that came after me. Gene Norris, Millen Ellis. I get to the Citadel, and at the Citadel they thought it was an open admission I was gay because I was majoring in English. So they just, they go, what? You're majoring in what? And I was one of three English majors in that class. But those teachers helped me. They learned I wanted to be a writer. I announced I wanted to be a writer. And Teresa, I was so dumb and so stupid. I did not know what that meant or what that entailed. I had no idea.
Well, aren't you glad you didn't?
Yeah, I'm glad now, but maybe I wouldn't have started if I'd known how dumb I was. And I would not have had any idea, what you have to go through to become a writer.
But books aren't just a diversion for you. I mean, you hold books sacred, don't you?
Oh, they're a passion. And, I own 8,000 books.
It's amazing.
And I like coming into libraries. I have a larger library than this library. And I've always loved that. And, I use these books. I have, my wife and I have, bought a new house, which is by a Salt Creek down in Beaufort, South Carolina. But the books center the world for me. I can learn everything in the world I want by taking one of those books off the shelf. And I do it often, and I read often, and I try to read deeply.
Your mother was a book lover.
Good God. My mother was one of those, she didn't go to college. No, we could never admit that when she was alive. But she did not go to college. But what she did was every library we went to, and she had 7 kids, she'd march us all in, a little bitty, she'd march us all in, and every member of the library could get 5 books. So we would march out of there with 30 books every week, and we were required to read them. She'd give us little quizzes, little tests, and that was part of a training I find invaluable right now. Yeah. And what a mother. And you could not have had a better mother to create a Southern writer.
Do you think under different circumstances she might have become a writer herself?
I think, here's what is funny. Since I was doing this memoir about Dad's death, I came across letters of Mom and Dad, lots of letters. They were both terrific writers.
Isn't that amazing?
They both were really good writers, really good styles. Really could say a lot in a sentence, really could make a sentence sit up and take notice of itself. And, I'm sure they didn't know that when they were growing up.
One of your mother's books that she held sacred was Gone with the Wind. How have your feelings toward that book evolved over the years?
Well, because I'm a liberal Democrat of the worst kind, the knee-jerk variety, I went along with everybody else. Mom read it to me 4 or 5 times when I was a kid. I loved it. And what I loved about that Mom did, it was important for my career later, Teresa, is Mom could point out every character in Gone with the Wind and supply a character in my own family. And she would say, now, Pat, when I read to you about Miss Scarlett, you're naturally going to be reminded about your flirtatious, wonderful mother. And Dad was in Korea then, and she said, and Rhett Butler, that dashing scoundrel, he's going to remind you of your daddy. He's fighting our nation's enemy right now. And Melanie Wilkes, that tacky Aunt Helen down there in Orlando. And she had an entire world. So it was my first, I think I was 5 years old when she first read it. But from that time on, whenever she read it, she would add Frank Kennedy, who he was. And she kept adding people into the list. Mm-hmm. And so I think my mother taught me a very important thing for artists to learn is a relationship between life and art.
And that is an important
I think it's very important. Nothing is lost. Everything can be gained. Everything can be noticed. Everything can be taken down. But it's up to you to remember, mm-hmm. to assess, to judge. And I think they have a good sense of humor about it all.
You know, there was talk for a while that you would do a sequel to Gone with the Wind. How serious was that?
It was fairly serious for me. The people that ran Gone with the Wind, the foundation, the first day they came in and talked about it, and I wanted to do it because of my mother.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I wanted to do the autobiography of Rhett Butler by Pat Conroy, dedicated to Peg Conroy. Mm-hmm. That was a great time in my life. Nobody would have understood it except me, but it was very moving to me. Mom used to take me to say the rosary at Margaret Mitchell's grave in Atlanta. I mean, I had a more than passing relationship with this woman. But the first thing they asked, they said, Pat, you have to sign a paper which says you won't write about miscegenation and you won't write about homosexuality. Mm-hmm. And I said, gentlemen, what kind of writer would I be if I signed that?
But it's fun to speculate, though. What do you see Rhett doing after the close of Gone with the Wind?
Here's what I was going to do. I didn't see him doing anything. I was going to write Gone with the Wind from his point of view.
How fascinating.
I was going to say, okay, that's what happened to you, Charlotte. Now let me give you my turn.
Yeah.
But I would never got too much further than that. And they would say things like, well, I imagine when the money, is counted, you'll change your mind fast. And I said, you guys don't know me.
Yeah. They didn't, did they?
And I said, you just don't know. And it came out in different ways, and it never really was taken off the table. So finally, I just said, no, I'm not doing this. Mm-hmm. And they told me it's because of greed. And I never asked how much I was making.
Yeah. It's about ethics.
Yeah, I just,
About your integrity as a writer.
And I told them, what am I going to do? I have a sister that's gay. I got a nephew that's black. What do I tell them?
Well, exactly. Another book you write about in my reading life is a wonderful novel, To Kill a Mockingbird. What's your favorite scene in that book, Pat?
I've got so many of them. My mother was bitten by a rabid dog when she was a child. Mm-hmm. And so when I came across that scene, rabid dogs terrified me, just the thought of them in that scene. But, I'm a sucker for stand up. Your daddy's passing.
Isn't that a wonderful line?
I mean, I just am a sucker for it. And I feel very related to that book. My daughters gave me the, I don't know what this is. Okay, you email me. My daughters, I didn't know what email was, mm-hmm. but they forced me to give it. And my handle, or whatever you call that thing, is Atticus. Mm-hmm. So the book, I got my kids to read the book. I think it's one of the great books of all time. And it's funny, I think it's going to be taught in classrooms for the rest of time. And another one I think is going to be taught is to help. who was, I think that book is, said something needed to be said. And, but it's funny how that works, what books you can teach in high school, what you can't. And, it's always a dilemma. My books, my characters cuss. So I just don't know what to do about that, but that's what they do.
One of my favorite chapters in the book is your love letter to Thomas Wolfe. Man.
My English teacher, Gene Norris, when he gave me Lacona Angel, I was 15, and he said, "I think you're ready for the many pleasures of Thomas Wolfe." Ready? I went nuts. I could have been sued by the Thomas Wolfe estate for years for the way I wrote. I mean, I just went absolutely crazy. But another thing about life and art is Gene took me to his house where he grew up. And I looked all over there, and I was identifying so much with Thomas Wolfe. But it was another thing of a teacher showing me the relationship between all these things, how Thomas Wolfe had been to Charleston, how Thomas Wolfe had done this. I called Thomas Wolfe's brother, trying to get him to speak at the Citadel when I was there. The Citadel offered him nothing, no gas. No.
Same deal we offered you.
I mean, it's like, it's amazing. It's still sort of the same thing. But I learned about the South by reading about the South.
You're a famous writer yourself now. Are you still in awe of other writers?
I'll always be in awe of other writers. First of all, now I know how hard it is to write a book.
I remember how excited you were when Earl Hamner was here a few years ago and you got to meet him.
I went crazy. And I went absolutely wild. And because, I had read Spencer's Mountain because of my mother. And then when it became The Waltons on TV, my family watched it religiously. And we would do these parodies of, "Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy. Good night, John Boy." And in our family, we, "Hey, Peg, sorry I beat you up tonight." "That's okay, Don." "Pat, did you survive the beating?" "Mom, I can't talk. I'm taking care of Carol. She passed out." So I got to tell Earl all that. It had this, great effect on us. But we saw a family and how they should act.
Yeah. I love the Waltons, too. If we could go into your private study, what books would we find on your desk?
Okay. I went back and read the plays of Escos. I went back and read Brideshead Revisited because I loved that book, and I love the prose on that book, and I still do. Yeah, I've been going through a very heavy reading schedule now, and I've done lots and lots of books. Simone Weil was I think a very great philosopher and thinker that died at 34 in France. And I went back because of something T.S. Eliot said. Then T.S. Eliot brought me to something Henry James said, so I read The Wings of the Dove, which I'd never read. And so it works like that to me. Something will snap off. Something will happen to me in Tulsa that will make me go to these books written by people from Oklahoma that I don't know about yet, but I'll find out about, tonight or tomorrow. And it always is one thing sparking off another. And to me, it's a great way to live.
Well, your desk is a lot tidier now because you finished The Death of Santini. Did you always know you were going to write this book?
No. I only knew it when my father, Dad was the worst father I have ever seen when we were growing up. He was abusive to Mom, to me, to everybody. And I just hated his guts. So my poor mother dies early, and there's Dad. We have no idea. We all hate him. What are we going to do with him? And he has the good sensibility to change. And he spent the rest of his life trying to be a good father. Now, poor Dad, the Marine fighter trying to be a good father, There were some steps on the way that he needed to work on, but he did. He worked hard, and when he died, he was a very beloved man.
Give us a sense of what kind of an emotional investment a book like this is.
A book like this?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's the emotional investment of this is nonfiction. My brothers and sisters are terrified. They're throwing up in their sink each night, thinking of what my portrait of them is likely to be. They've even taken a call on me to remember hilarious things they had done or said over the years, and I should be writing about it in this book. And so the whole family now, the whole Conroy family from Chicago, from Alabama, both sides are simply, they can't believe what I'm about to write. They can't believe I'm writing it, and they're scared to death. And as I tell them, oh, you should be.
Well, you wrote The Great Santini, a wonderful book, but of course very autobiographical. What was the family's reaction to that?
Horrible. Horrible. My father threw it across the room and stomped it. My mother went crazy because she thought she should have had the book, not The Great Santini. I was the power in that house, son. He was too stupid to be the power. And so I learned all these things after that book came out. And I said, Mom, I'll get you next time out. I know what you're talking about. But so, you know, you live, and I once lived this with Defusky Island.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the people in Defusky didn't have any idea I was writing a book. Mm-hmm. And suddenly this thing appears out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it upsets everybody. It upset Buford. But
and then the film came out.
The film came out, my God, my film came and I'm like, that was, you know, horrendous.
What did your father think about Robert Duvall as him?
Okay, first of all, Dad, I take you to see Duvall. And he says, they got a midget to play me, son. I said, don't worry, Dad, when it gets on the silver screen, you can look 50 feet tall. And then we watched the basketball scene being filmed. And it was a very pressure-packed, emotional scene. And so Dad's watching, he said, I said, how you liking it, Dad? And he said, they've got two Hollywood fruitcakes playing basketball for us, son. He said, you and I can play ball. He said, why don't we go in there and play the one-on-one game, show them how it's done? I said, Dad, don't worry. Because, you know, they were missing stuff and didn't have the right moves, the right, you know. So I said, Dad, don't worry. Every basket will go in. They'll look like gods of the game.
Well, absolutely. You know, we had Sally Ann Robinson on the show earlier, and she was talking about what it was like having you as a teacher and how the experience changed their lives dramatically. How did it change your life, Pat?
Well, you know, I knew it was the first year of teacher integration. You know, I was the first person to teach black children in that part of the world. Now, the things that now tickle me, that just would have enraged me at the time, no one had told those kids a white teacher was coming over. Mm-hmm. So they come up by bus the first day, and they look out, they see me, and some of them thought I was a Klansman. Some of them thought I was a horrible racist that hated black people and wouldn't teach them and would refuse to teach them. So they had all kinds of questions about me I did not know about.
And you were a man, and I don't think they were used to having a male
teacher.
teacher.
They never had a man teacher. And the black principal would say, you know, what's you doing over there? You know, you wearing pants.
And there you go. And that book, of course, was The Water is Wide, which is a beloved, beloved book. People are calling me all the time, or have been since they heard that you were coming, and they just love that. That's one of their favorites. Do you have a book that you can point to that was fun to write?
No.
Oh. Yeah, they're all, because you pick heavy subjects.
No.
Not even the cookbook?
No.
Not a single fun book in the
No,
next...
there's just, you know, agony, 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 a trail of tears that, you know, goes from the beginning of my career to the last minute I wrote on Wednesday night.
Was this Wednesday night when you finished The
Or
Death of
Tuesday
Santini?
night. Tuesday night.
Tuesday
I'm
night.
sorry.
How do you come down from something like that?
I go to Oklahoma.
You go to Oklahoma, and that takes your
I
mind.
go to Tulsa.
Is it hard to let a book go?
Not for me. You know, I can tell you how unhard it is. When I was coming here, I've not read The Water's Wide since I wrote it. And I was 24 when I wrote that book. And I said, I better read it, get to read it. So I go into the Savannah airport, and I find 2 rows of Sally Ann Robinson's cookbook, who I taught in 6th grade. I mean, she's like, they're lined up, they got pictures of her, they got posters of her. I could not find a copy of The Water is Wide anywhere in there.
Well,
But it was also a great feeling.
I'm wondering about sequels. Have you ever thought about doing a sequel to The Prince of Tides?
I think I have. I think that's, you know, I think basically what I wrote this book about, Teresa, was I think I've been writing the same book.
Do you really? And
Yeah.
how does it change, though?
Well, I'll have to make it, you know, a shrunk. You know, Dad would drive me crazy. And he'd say, you know, you made me a Marine like I was, and you had me beat up my family for 600 pages. And I said, yes, Dad. And then the next one, you made me a drunk shrimper. And then the one after that, you made me a jerk that was a judge. I said, Dad, you couldn't catch a shrimp at a Long John Silver's, okay? Don't give me this. And he said something that was very good literary criticism. He said, that's true, but you can't write the word father down without thinking of me, because I was such a powerful force and presence in your life.
But, well, which is so true, but both of your parents have got to be so proud, though, or were so proud of what you accomplished as a writer.
There was pride after the explosion. There was.
There had to have been, particularly from your mother who loved books so much.
Yeah, I mean, Mom got with it, and she got to be photographed with President Carter, so she liked that kind of stuff.
When you were writing The Prince of Tides, did you think about your mother and what her reaction might have been to the book?
I would not have written The Prince of Tides if Mom had been alive.
So, but did you ever think, was her presence with you?
Oh my God. And because she was a complicated woman, and it was her criticism of the great Santini, that I did not get it, that she was smarter than Dad, she ran that household, she was the power in the house. And I just said, Mom, I got it. Don't you worry, I got it. But I just didn't have the courage to write it yet.
As you were writing The Death of Santini, did you just make some discoveries about your dad and about your family that surprised you or that you really hadn't confronted before?
Well, when I decided to kill him at the end of the book, that surprised me. And then, of course, I came to the problem, how do you fly a jet plane? I don't know if you all know how to do it.
No.
You know.
I gave it up a few years ago.
But I didn't know if you went in, you turned the key, you know, you put it in gear, and you march it down the field. And so I had to use Dad. I said, Dad, I found this great way to end this book. I'm going to kill you. And
So you talked to him about it beforehand.
And he said, you'll be getting rid of one of the great characters of American fiction, son. And I said, what modesty, Dad? But he taught me how to fly a plane, taught me how to crash the plane. And I said, anything wrong, I'm going to blame you. But he was great.
So he was involved in the process.
He was involved.
Process of the book.
And both of them got involved in the process of making the movie, The Great Santini.
Oh, that had to have been fun for the whole
I mean,
family.
they really both got into that.
In writing The Death of Santini, did you find some closure to some of the old issues in your family?
I think so. It's, you know, we've now lived through so much. I had a brother that committed suicide, and it was agony for all of us. And he had paranoid schizophrenia. But, you know, I was thinking, Teresa, I'm old enough now to know this. Every family has tragedy. none of us get away with it unless I haven't met them. You know, you may do it, but it seems to be the way human life is and the way it'll always be. You know, I went into a room in Beaufort the other day. There was this book club in there, and I didn't know them. They didn't know me, but they heard I was there, so they asked me in just to speak to them. So I went in, and this question came up about, you know, their family. And I said, "Let me ask you something. I have just written a 500-page book, and I just think my family is crazy as hell. And do y'all feel that about your family?" Every one of them did. And I said, "Why is that?" And one of them said, "Pat, we're old enough to know now. That's just the way it is." And we also know all of us make the best of it we can.
We just have 30 seconds left. And on that wonderful note, I've got to ask you, what is the most important story you still haven't told us yet?
You know, I think I've got to write, and I may do it in this next book. I taught for 2 years when I got out of the Citadel at Beaufort High School. Flipped out over teaching, flipped out over those kids. Went to Europe for the first time with 3 other teachers. And I've not told that story, and I love that story. And I think that's what I'm going to tackle next.
It's going to be wonderful. Thank you so much for being here.
Always a pleasure, Teresa.
And thank all of you for joining us on Writing Out Loud.